All right, Krystal, what's on your radar?
Well, guys, not to state the obvious here, but the entire housing market is a total insanity-inducing mess, which is no big deal, unless, of course, you care about people having luxury goods like basic shelter, or about anyone not already wealthy ever being able to build wealth, or about Wall Street giants running every aspect of our lives. Feel free to tune out if none of those items are of interest to you. So let's start with this. The pandemic-era eviction ban ends at the end of June. That means that all of the people who've been able to keep a roof over their heads through catastrophe and shutdowns, through the grace offered in this program, are about to have a big bill come due. It's a major financial cliff that potentially millions of Americans are about to be pushed over. According to Moody's, 10 million Americans are behind on their rent right now. Now, Congress did manage to see this problem coming, and they passed provisions in the relief bill to help get tenants current on their bills. The only problem is very little of this money is actually getting into the hands of the people who need it. So the Washington Post chronicled the struggles of one town to match the money with the many residents of their city who are in need of it. Decatur, Illinois, a city with a high unemployment rate, plenty of struggles, has still managed to place only a paltry sum of the money granted with needy tenants. One nonprofit who was tasked with distributing $500,000, they've struggled to grant $40,000. They've only been able to help about 21 families. The biggest issue wasn't need, which was plenty and obvious. The problem was a really simple one. The paperwork is just too onerous. In particular, families are struggling to prove that they had in fact suffered due to the pandemic and were thus worthy of help. Now think about that for a second. Of course, the government routinely makes working class and poor Americans prove their poverty and their worthiness in order to gain any sort of government benefits. Contrast that to the treatment of Jeff Bezos. His Blue Origin company is looking at a $10 billion bailout from the U.S. Senate after they lost out to Elon Musk on a major NASA contract. These billionaires love their spaceship, guys. I don't know what to tell you. So the bottom line is that millions of renters face catastrophe with no help in sight unless they can miraculously produce the magical documentation proving without a doubt that their precarious situation is thanks to the pandemic. But hey, one man's personal catastrophe is another man's private equity investment opportunity, am I right? With tenants unable to access rent assistance and make payments on their back rent, landlords are desperate to kick them out of their units so that they can get new, more flush tenants into that space. This financial incentive to speed up the process of rendering millions of tenants homeless was made clear in a new report from David Sirota and Andrew Perez. They found that at the same time that Koch Industries has been getting into the landlord business, Koch Foundation has been pushing to speed up evictions. Koch Industries has been snapping up homes across the country with the intention of renting them back to families. You could think of them as becoming America's landlord here. Sirota and Perez point to a Wall Street Journal report from March declaring Charles Koch is betting big on distressed real estate. So meanwhile, Koch Foundation is backing lawsuits to overturn the eviction ban. It's a textbook example of how oftentimes what's dressed up as political advocacy is really just cold, hard capitalism by another name. But it would be wrong to just single out Koch Industries in our story of housing market insanity here. As I've covered before, financial speculators now account for about 1/5 of the real estate market, higher in some markets. It's a key and often untold part of the story of skyrocketing housing prices. The Wall Street Journal recently had a report on how these spiking prices aren't just confined to big cities, by the way, but to small town America as well. In particular, they profiled a young couple trying to buy a house in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, who had been outbid more than 20 times in their quest to buy a relatively modest house for what is still, to me, a whole lot of money, $250,000. They just simply can't compete with out-of-town buyers who have all cash and for whom the difference between, say, $250K and $300K is literally irrelevant. So let me draw the through line between all of these pieces here for you. If rental assistance doesn't go out and renters get kicked out on the streets, Wall Street benefits when mom and pop landlords are forced to sell to avoid bankruptcy. If the eviction ban is overturned, Wall Street benefits because they can kick non-paying renters out of their properties faster. If the eviction ban is not overturned, Wall Street benefits again by the chance to buy up those properties from mom and pop landlords that they can't hold on to. Wall Street is causing the spike in housing prices, and then they're also benefiting from the spike in housing prices. Every way you look at it, regular people are getting screwed, communities are literally being financialized, and wealth is being vacuumed up to the top, even as the most basic element of the American dream, homeownership, becomes just another plaything for the wealthy. A fake boom fueling real wealth transfers to the already rich and leaving everyone else with less and less of a shot at just the basics of a stable and dignified life. There is no distinction between Wall Street and Main Street anymore. Everything and everywhere is commoditized. Now look, I don't want to be all doom and gloom here. In some ways, I like where the country is now more than I liked where the country was a year ago. I'm glad Trump is gone. I'm really glad COVID is in decline. I'm looking forward to a summer with my kids, play dates, swimming pools, normal stuff. Jobs are coming back. Wages might even be going up. But stories like these about the housing market, they are a grim reminder that in a very real way, this country is at a breaking point. Its basic premises revealed to be fraudulent, its institutions so bankrupt that DC can't even muster support for some roads and bridges, let alone to have the wealthy pay back a tiny shred of what they robbed from you during the pandemic. No wonder billionaires like Musk and Bezos are lining up to build spaceships, giving them the ultimate safety net, a way to escape this planet altogether. Because everywhere you look, the medium and the long-term warning lights are flashing bright red. In housing, in wealth, in water, in policing, in climate, I could go on and on. We have built a rickety and fundamentally unsustainable system, and the trends driving this lack of sustainability, they only seem to be accelerating. Frankly, I would like it a whole lot better if the Biden era was actually as boring as all the pundits say. And you can just see, Sagar, what's brewing under the surface here. You go out and try to buy a house right now.
Impossible.
Yeah, forget about it. Yeah. And not just in not just here in New York and LA. This is in towns all across America. And it's happening for a very specific reason, which is that all of these giant corporations, all of these extraordinarily wealthy people got even wealthier during the pandemic. They've got all this cash to spend. And so they're buying up real estate and jacking up the prices like crazy.
We're basically re-entering a period of the 1990s. And what happened is that was ultimately when wage stagnation set in for the working class at the same time that NAFTA and all these other things clicked into place and wealth just completely, changed. And the biggest problem that we have is that for about 200 to 250 million in America today, life is pretty good, actually. Yeah. You got money in the bank and all of that. But the larger the gap becomes between the 200 million and the bottom 100 million or 150 million, then the worse our politics is going to continue to get. And everything is about the middle. How is the middle feeling? And not unfortunately, I'm glad that they're doing well. But I'm saying from a political perspective, for example, I was looking at a poll this morning, which is that 54% of Americans, support cutting off unemployment insurance, $300 in federal. And I understand that. They're like, well, I'm doing fine. Everybody else I knew is doing fine. Middle class is doing okay. They just have no literal connection with a lot of the people who understand what is actually happening in terms of the motels that we talked about, the people losing their houses and more. And the more that we bifurcate away, what we're going to have is a more radical politics in the future. The bill always comes due in America. Yep. Always. We learned it in the 1920s, learned it in the 1990s, in the 2000 bust, and in Iraq. Now we're going to learn it all over again because our leadership, both Trump and Biden, have decided not to do and put in place what was necessary. And my fear is that the next crash will be big. Who knows when it will come? Maybe 10 years, maybe 15. Unfortunately, it'll probably happen within my lifetime. Already in my own adult lifetime, I've lived to see two of the worst Great Depressions. Yeah. Since the Great Depression.
The speed with which these things are coming seems to be picking up.
Financialization and commoditization is the biggest story of all of that. It's at the heart. It's the poison of the ultimate culmination of what we built our economy on since we transitioned to the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
And the bill came due many times. It will come again, and we just continue to fail to learn our lesson.
Which is exactly why I say there is no distinction between Wall Street and Main Street now. Politicians love to use this phrase Wall Street has bought up Main Street. Wall Street owns Main Street. Yeah. It's Amazon and Walmart on Main Street now, or Main Street is shuttered. There is no Main Street anymore. And now they're coming for your houses and your communities too. So that's the one way that Americans have been able to build sustainable wealth. It's a big part of the reason why you have such a large wealth gap between white Americans and black and brown Americans is because of the discriminatory practices in housing that blocked black Americans from being able to build that wealth. That is the path to wealth, to standard middle class or upper middle class wealth in this country. And so if you have Wall Street blocking that entryway, Then you have a population that is increasingly desperate, increasingly precarious, increasingly unstable. I would dispute the idea that there are, I think you said 200 million Americans who are 250 who are doing okay. When you have, somewhere between 40 and 50% of Americans who say they couldn't handle a $400 emergency. Right. You got a lot of people out there who are living hand to mouth. So I feel like we're in this in-between space where some of the top-line indicators are good, jobs coming back, unemployment claims going down, people feeling better about the direction of the country, wages may even start to go up because businesses are realizing like they're not coming back for $7.25 an hour anymore. But you look at these signs underneath the surface, or the ones that we've covered for a long time, like suicide rates and overdose deaths and signs of misery across the country, and it paints a very troubling picture.
I think that's right.
Sagar, looking forward to your radar. That's next.